Call to order this meeting, February 21st, actually the special meeting of March 28th of the Santa Barbara Airport Commission. A roll call, please.
Craig Curry.
Here.
Kirk Martin. Carl Hopkins.
Here.
Karen Kahn. Bruce Miller.
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Thank you. Changes to the agenda? Do we have any changes?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Notices that on Friday, March 22nd, 2018 at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. We have our general public comment. Do we have any speaker slips?
No speaker slips.
All right, thank you. That brings us right to our liaison reports. I see we do have our City of Goleta representative, Michael D. Bennett. Anything to share with us?
Surely. Good evening. I'm going to comment on a couple of things that certainly have an effect on all of us. I just came back from the Economic Forecast Project presentation at the Libero in regards to the impacts of potential tax losses and to business losses, etc. This is kind of a first blush. They've informed us that there will be more information forthcoming. As early as next week, there'll be more information forthcoming, but it'll take a number of months yet before we all find out where we're at in regards to the tax impacts, which of course impacts the entire county for the different services that are provided, including in Montecito, of course, the school districts, which is far more focused. So I thought I would make mention of that, and this information that was presented today is available on the Economic Forecast Project website, and so you can pick up on all the presentations that were made, and the information will be available there. We were assured of that, so I'd highly recommend that people take a look at that. I thought it was incredibly informative and very well attended, I might add. On another note, everyone here knows that we are going to start the retimed Amtrak service known as the Surfliner, and that will begin on Monday, the 2nd of April. It'll arrive first, obviously, in Santa Barbara Depot at about 6:50 or thereabouts, give or take a few minutes. And your schedule will show that it arrives in Goleta at about 7:15, but that's because there's built-in time. So in reality, it'll be here probably closer to about 5 minutes after 7. Mm-hmm. So we've had a tremendous, should back up a moment. I sit on the LoSAN Board of Directors. I was selected to represent Santa Barbara County. So when I say we, that's who I'm talking about in regards to LoSAN and the Surfliner. And SBCAG has received quite a high number of people that want to ride the train. So we're incredibly excited. We've had tremendous outreach with so many employers who have indicated that they're going to be supporting this, and that's just awesome. We've waited a long, long time for this. I've been informed that some people say they started 20 years ago. Could very well be. I got involved in 07. What the heck, this is only 2018. So, it only took us 11 years to get there, but unfortunately, we have to depend on so many others. If it was a decision just based upon Santa Barbara County, we'd have trained 11 years ago. But that just wasn't the case. We have to work with all of the cooperators, and I've been given quite an education in the few years I've been involved in this process, and it was difficult under the best of circumstances to do this. But I'm excited. We're there. We're going forward, and the interest seems to be just fantastic. So thank you very much for the time.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a quick question. I guess it's been that
Could you
long.
speak in the microphone so I can hear?
I guess it's been quite some time since I took the train. I must have missed the memo. The Surfliner stopping here 11 years ago? Or
No. The Surfliner's been in effect since the mid-'80s. It started coming north, I believe, in the early '90s when it came up here. It started out just going from Union Station to San Diego, and then it was expanded, and I believe that occurred either in '89 or '90 and went as far as San Luis Obispo. But what we're doing is taking the existing train that was timed later in the morning and retiming it so that it arrives here It's a regional rail, intercity rail. That's the law. That's where we get the money. And so commuter rail gets money from different pockets of money. So that's the distinction between the two different types of services.
And so just to be specific, the win, what is the win that we're excited about? That the time has changed, or it's a more convenient time for commuters?
Well, we're getting the results of the win by the people expressing their interest to travel it and get off the freeway. The freeway was promoted on a lane and train effort.
Got it.
And there's no way that the freeway will ever be able by itself to carry the capacity that's been anticipated into the future. Obviously, it's having a very difficult time now with 2 lanes. Well, 3 lanes, even once that's accomplished, it'll be very difficult to accommodate the commuters that come up from Ventura County.
Got it.
And the train really and truly is the answer, and we'll continue to work. This is just the first step. There were estimates when we first started with Measure A back in '07 that we would have a need for as many as 3 trains in the morning. That still may be the case. I don't know that. That's something we'll learn about over time. But the fact of the matter is that's the only place where capacity can be expanded because, as we probably all know, widening the freeway any more than it is already will be most likely an impossibility in our community.
No, thank you. So the retiming makes us much more convenient for commuters coming to work
Absolutely.
and then going back.
Absolutely. And we've already, as I say, seen the results of that by people signing up through SBCAG Traffic Solutions.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay.
Is Losan involved in the first and last mile?
We have contracted with MTD in downtown Santa Barbara. They will be moving personnel off the train. They'll be going as far up as Cottage Hospital and then dropping people off in between. And there will be, I'm told, an MTD bus and a trolley. And out here in Goleta, we have 2 MTD buses, and they will transport people to the west along Hollister Avenue into the business park before you get to Stork, and it'll come back out. It'll go all the way out to the west end to Log Me In, which is almost Elwood School. And then in the opposite direction with another bus, we will be going east on Hollister Avenue through Old Town and also to Cottage Hospital at Patterson Avenue. So we're picking up the last mile for that purpose.
Sounds like a very great undertaking.
I beg your pardon?
A very great undertaking.
It is a great undertaking, and we're going to learn a lot. You know, I'm not suggesting here that we've got all the answers to everything. We're going to learn a lot just in the first week, I'm pretty certain. And as we continue on with the service, I expect that we're going to learn a great deal more.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for that report and everything you did to help bring that to reality. All right, did we get Councilmember Dominguez anywhere? Nope. Up here. All right, that brings us to the consent calendar. Any changes from the consent calendar?
No changes.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar, which consists of waiving the reading of the minutes, waiving the reading of the subcommittee minutes, approving the minutes, property management reports, and 3 lease agreements and the integrated pest management report.
So move.
Second.
So move.
All right, all in favor of approving the consent calendar?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you very much. The consent calendar is approved. And thank you for the integrated pest management report. It's always riveting reading. And on to item 10, the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 2019. We have a presentation.
Yes, we do. Tom Bullers will do the presentation. Deanna.
Good evening, Airport Commissioners. I'm here to talk about the fiscal year 2019 proposed airline rates and charges. So fiscal year 19 starts on July 1, 2018 and runs through June 30th of 2019. So just a little bit of background. The airlines operate here under a 3-year operating agreement. That operating agreement details some operational security considerations, and it also provides for annual adjustments to the rates and charges that the airlines pay. So things like terminal rental, boarding bridge fees, landing fees, etc. One of the big drivers of the airline rates and charges is changes in passenger numbers. Year over year, fiscal year, FY17 over 16, we saw about a 10% increase. That was a really strong increase. We're projecting about a 6.3% increase at the end of FY18. That's less than the budgeted amount. We had budgeted about 13.5%. When we were putting together the budget for FY18, the airlines had indicated some really big upgauging of their aircraft. What we've seen so far, kind of the big two reasons that we see that number down a little bit. Over the summer months, for example, United increased capacity to SFO by about a third, but we only saw single-digit percentage increases. And then through some of the winter months here, American has, for example, downgauged the A319 to DFW and flying a 76-seat RJ instead of the 128-seat A319. For FY19, we're projecting about a 5% passenger increase over FY18 numbers. And that's sort of based on load factors from similar periods last year and what we think the seat capacity is going to be based on the airline's public schedules right now. So within the agreements detail what recoverable costs we can charge the airlines for. So that includes O&M costs, capital improvements, debt service for the new terminal. They get credited for the PFC revenues that we collect. And then also deposits to our mandatory reserve fund. So each year we have to have 25% of our operating fund in reserve. That's a city council policy. For the rates and charges, we allocate operational costs among a few different cost centers. The terminal building is important for the terminal rental rates. The boarding bridge is important for the boarding bridge rates. And then everything else kind of gets thrown together for the landing fees. For fiscal year 2019, we've adjusted the terminal building and other categories from previous years. We're anticipating the other going up a little bit more, the cost going up a little bit more in FY19 as the hangar facilities at 495 South Fairview return to the airport, and we assume the O&M of that facility. Similarly, we've decreased the terminal building from 50% to 45%. So to calculate the terminal building rents, we take the terminal building cost, so that's that 45% plus the debt service allocation for the terminal. That gives us that total terminal building cost. And then the airlines receive some credit for rental car revenues and concession revenues. And then we have a total terminal building requirement and divide that by the square footage of the terminal. So the calculated rate there is $107. We negotiated a rate of $107, so they match there. And then we multiply that by the total amount of square footage that are going to be rented from the airlines, and that gives us the $2.6 million anticipated revenue next year. For the boarding bridges, we look at O&M costs and then add on the debt service requirements for the boarding bridges, that $248,000, and we take and divide by the projected turns. For next year, we're not anticipating any big changes in the turns. That's really based on turns so far this year. That gives us a $45 per turn rate, and again equals that $248,000. Remain overnight fees, a relatively new fee created in 2017, fiscal year 2017. That was at the request of a couple of our airlines. The rate is equal to the boarding bridge rate. We don't want to have them different. They're kind of scooping up aircraft that are parked on the ramp overnight and not using a boarding bridge. When an aircraft is parked at the boarding bridge, then they're exempted from the remain overnight fee. The landing fees collect everything, so we take the whole airport cost base, $20.1 million, and then credit all the other revenues other than landed weights, really, so commercial, industrial, parking, rental cars, and then also the terminal building space from previous slides, and eventually we get a landing fee requirement. We take the projected landing weight, that 521,000 pound units, That's a similar amount to what we're projecting FY18 to end at, and that would give us a calculated landing rate of $4.47. The negotiated rate is a little lower than that. You'll see $4.07. There's two points I'd like to make there. The first is we're negotiating with the airlines, and we don't necessarily want to increase their fees by 12 or 20% in one big go. But the other one is the calculated rate is based on budget, and we know based on experience that we have savings, especially in vacancies and other areas. So that calculated rate in actuality at year end comes down closer to the negotiated rate. So the overall revenues from landing fees about $2.1 million. We met with the airlines in February, distributed some detailed information to them that went into calculating these rates and charges. All three airlines agreed that these rates were okay with them, so they would take effect on July 1st, 2018. This is just a summary of the rate changes we're proposing compared to the current fiscal year 2018. So the terminal building rental is about a little less than a 3% increase to $107. The landing fees, about a 2% increase to $4.07. The boarding bridge and remain overnight fees, $45, and then no changes proposed to the fuel flowage fees. One of the standard industry measures to kind of compare airports is cost per enplanement. So it's the airline's overall, or the airport's overall cost divided by the number of enplanements. Kind of lets you compare airports. You'll note Santa Barbara, we're over here on the top end. One of the big drivers, obviously, is that enplanement number. So we kind of increase, and that's really kind of when we saw our passengers start going down, and then we've started coming down as our enplanements have gone up. So a little high within the state here. This is all airports with commercial air service in California, but we think we're still pretty competitive. So the Airport Commission Budget Subcommittee met on March 14th, and they recommended approval of the airline rates and charges to the full Airport Commission. And with that, we're recommending the Commission approve the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 19. Building rates of $107 a square foot, landing fees of $4.07, boarding bridge and remain overnight fees of $45, and fuel flowage fees of 5 cents per gallon of fuel sold. Any questions?
Question? No? Well, staff is recommending that we approve the rates to be effective July 1st. Nope. Go ahead.
Second?
Okay.
I'm seconding your motion.
I didn't make a motion, but you can second. Did you make a motion?
I was waiting for him to make a motion so I could second it.
All right.
I'll move it
So
then.
start over again. I think we're good. All right. All in favor of approving the airline rates and charges for fiscal year 2019?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. Approved. Thank you very much. On to item 11, the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2019.
So good evening again. Fiscal year 2019 budget, they're related to the rates and charges. The rates and charges feed into our fiscal year 19 budget. So just a brief outline here. We're going to talk about the department generally, our budget assumptions, and then move into the actual fiscal year 19 budget, and then finally some key performance objectives. So the mission statement of the department: as the Tri-County region's airport of choice, Santa Barbara Airport will be self-sustaining, exceed expectations for safety and quality service, and meet the air transportation and economic development needs of its customers and partners. The airport is an enterprise fund, so that means we're financially self-supporting. We generate revenues from tenant rents and user fees. We don't take any general fund subsidies. We're also certificated by the FAA, and that means we have a lot of FAA regulations and also some TSA regulations, and around areas like ARF and maintenance and security. We have 8 programs covering a lot of different facets of airport management. Business and property management includes the parking operation, and certain operations includes ARF. Our department is, in FY18, has 61 permanent full-time employees. We're proposing an increase of 2 in the certain ops division. You can see our department is really focused in these maintenance, security, and certain ops categories. These airport employees are also augmented by 9 firefighters that we pay for ARF services from the fire department, and also 2 engineers that we pay from the Public Works Department. Some of our budget assumptions. We generally assume stability in the GA levels of activity and in our commercial industrial leasing. We have a couple big exceptions there. The 495 South Fairview hangars, the ground lease expires on May 8th of this year, 2018. That facility will return to the airport, and we'll have to assume some operations and maintenance costs associated with that, but we'll also generate some revenue. So we're anticipating about $1.8 million in fiscal year 19 from that lease. And then also the FBO leases, I think it was in December, we were at the Airport Commission regarding a 2-year lease extension and increasing those rates by 25 and 50% for each of the FBOs. The airline rates and charges we just went over, those were factored into the assumptions. And the air service changes, again, feed into the budget. 6% roughly increase in passengers in FY18, and then a 5% increase in FY19. This is just a chart of the emplanements. You can see we had some really strong numbers, and then the economic crisis hit, and they came down. We plateaued for a while. And then American Eagle and Frontier left, and we kind of reached the bottom there in FY16, but we've seen some strong growth over the last couple of years, and FY18 and 19 we project being around this same plateau level of service. So again, a 6% increase in FY18 and a 5% increase in FY19. So on to the actual fiscal year 2019 budget. Whenever we put together our budget, we also look at where we think we're going to wind up in the current year, so we project our revenues for FY 2018. Within some of these categories, we project to be up and down a little bit, but this total number at the bottom is about at budget. For 2019, we're proposing a budget of about $20.4 million. You can see the breakdown between the terminal and commercial aviation and non-commercial aviation. One of the things that I really want to note here is when the 495 South Fairview lease and the FBO leases are factored in, this number right here, this percentage of total revenue, 20%, is a big increase from what it's been in the past. That number a few years ago was more like 12%. So we're kind of diversifying our revenue sources here, so it's getting close to being equal between those 4 big parts of the pie. We also look at expenditures in FY18. For this, we project to be at the bottom line here about 3% under budget, $650,000. 2 of the big drivers, and this has been a story for the last few fiscal years, is in the salaries and benefits category. We anticipate about a 4.5% vacancy savings. And then in the special projects here, we had budgeted for about 5 months of operations for the long-term parking lot 2 shuttle in anticipation of increased passenger counts and needing to move employees from the terminal over to long-term parking lot 2. We actually only need to do that for about 2 months, so we see some significant savings there. Just kind of go over some of our big expenditure requests in FY19. The 495 South Fairview facility, There'd be about $100,000 in added costs on an ongoing basis. So that's for HVAC maintenance, elevator maintenance, just maintaining the whole building overall. That's about $50,000 more than we had budgeted in our 2-year budget for FY19. We also anticipate about $60,000 in electrical costs for that facility. We increased overtime budget and security and certain ops by about $70,000, and that just to reflect the last 3 years' historical averages. We have a $60,000 allocated for a consultant to help us in the FBO development. And then we also have a maintenance contract for our new parking revenue control equipment, and that's a little less than $50,000 for next year. We also have some changes that we're proposing in our ground transportation program, and this is expenditures and revenues, but I'll start with the expenditures. So when we originally put together this budget, we anticipated having the enforcement done by the parking management contractor to the tune of about $130,000 a year. We've kind of changed that approach to having airport staff do the enforcement over at the curb for the commercial ground transportation program. We anticipate this will save us about $109,000 versus the status quo budget. That's just paying the airport staff versus paying the parking management contractor. And we also anticipate this program will be implemented around October 1st, so we'll generate about 9 months of revenue, or about $134,000. And just a quick refresh, the commercial ground transportation program, the big change here is a per pickup fee for the transportation network companies, TNCs, like Uber and Lyft. So we're also proposing a couple staffing changes. The first one there is an existing position that's airport security aide that we're proposing go to a senior airport security aide. That position is really a key part of the enforcement for the commercial ground transportation. This is the person who would be on the curb kind of managing what's going on over at the terminal. The other two positions, the airport operations specialist and the senior operations specialist, those are two new positions, and those are really so we can have 24/7 coverage of our Part 139 duties like airfield reporting, condition reporting, and wildlife hazard management. So another chart for our proposed expenditures, $20.4 million. We do have, as most organizations go, we do have a lot of personnel costs, so that's the big chunk here. Supplies and services includes ARF and engineering, so that's another big chunk out of there, and also our parking management contractor. In terms of our FY19 capital budget, our grant match, we're budgeting about $264,000 for our next year project, where we're going to be replacing an ARF truck and also rehabbing the apron around the 495 South Fairview facility. Lessee building maintenance, we're budgeting $350,000. We have a few projects that we're trying to focus on. One of them is some exterior improvements to building 344 that's currently occupied by Maripro. And then we have a few other items like replacing HVAC in the airfield electrical vault. Street maintenance, our big project that we're focusing on there is slurry sealing the long-term parking lot at the terminal. AOA paving and utility infrastructure, those are kind of ongoing maintenance costs for the respective utilities or AOA, paving, pavement. Airline terminal maintenance, that $50,000, we're looking to install a railing on top of the passenger boarding bridges. So there's maintenance staff that need to go up there, and kind of a safety issue with them tying in to do the maintenance. We're also putting aside $200,000 for 495 South Fairview. We haven't identified any specific improvements, but we know we need to make improvements. And then we're also putting aside $150,000 for the specific plan update in the industrial area, and I think Hazel's going to address that a little bit later in more detail. So just looking at our cash flow projections. This is a nice little chart because it kind of helps you see some trends and things that stand out. And just to, again, to reorient people to the revenues here on the left-hand column, commercial industrial is our facilities on the north side that we lease. Excuse me. Non-commercial aviation is aviation that's not commercial airlines, so really GA is kind of what that is. Terminal includes parking, rental cars, other concessions. Commercial aviation is the commercial airlines, so that includes landing fees, terminal rental, interest is interest. And I will note that interest is going up. That's a really nice thing. And then other is kind of a catch-all remainder. So going from FY17 over to FY20, just kind of highlighting some of the big items here that stand out. FY17, we sold some property to Direct Relief, received about $8.7 million from that sale, so that number is really big. FY18, the commercial industrial, building 114, when the tenant vacated that space, they reimbursed us for some of the costs that we had to incur, like new paint, new carpet. That's about $110,000 that they paid us, so that wasn't budgeted, and it was a nice little bump. Moving over to FY19, you see the South Fairview facility and the FBO leases. They fall under the non-commercial aviation, so you can see that really big bump from $2.5 million to $4.2. We also only assumed for the 495 Fairview lease 9 months of rent in fiscal year 19, so there's another big bump there in FY20. Passengers really factor in the terminal and commercial aviation, especially the terminal where the parking and rental cars and restaurant revenues are collected. That's really the big driver of those revenues. The ground transportation we see in the terminal area as well. And then the TSA reimburses us for law enforcement officers. Right now, the budget for next year includes no reimbursement. It's not included in the president's budget that's been declining for a number of years. So there's possible upside there if it is included, but we'll see. In FY20, this isn't part of the FY19 budget proper, but we anticipate the 6100 Hollister Avenue development coming online. That'd be 3 buildings. That's what we awarded a construction contract for. We expect about $270,000 in revenue, and that would be split between the operating fund and a development fund to fund future developments. Looking at the expenditure side, the last few years we've seen some major savings in salaries. Again, FY18 we anticipate about 4.5%. That's a little less than we've seen the last few years. The last few years have been closer to 7-8%. We're proposing some increased staffing. So the FY18 projected versus the FY19 proposed looks like a really big jump. And part of that is in FY19 we're adding the 2 positions, but also it's a budget number. We always budget for full staffing. The FY18 number reflects where we think we're actually going to end the year with our vacancy savings. So some of those big expenditure items that we added in, they show up in the supplies and services line in FY19. So again, the maintenance costs for 495 South Fairview, the FBO consultant, some of the parking equipment maintenance contract. Excuse me. The special projects, again, this is the long-term Lot 2 shuttle. In FY18, it only operated for 2 months. FY19, we budgeted again for 5 months. That's to cover that 2-month holiday period, but we also have some projects going on in the long-term terminal lot next year with the slurry seal project and also the solar canopies being installed. So we would anticipate about 3 months of possible shuttle operations for that. And again, the capital transfers, when we sold the property, we transferred the money into our development fund to actually fund the development. So just looking here at the bottom line, I think this number is the one that probably stands out, the $1 million loss for FY18 that we're projecting. We've had some big capital projects. Again, you can see this $2 million number is a pretty big capital number. That's for the replacement of the electrical switchgear over at 495 South Fairview. That's the Runway 725 project and all the other sort of ongoing capital projects we have. So what does that actually mean for our reserves and how we're doing financially? At the end of FY17, we had about $1.5 million. We knew we were going to have some projects coming up to cover. By the end of FY18, we anticipate being just a little bit above our reserve policy. That's the $300. One thing I will note here is the 25%, these two numbers here, the 10% budget reserve and 15% disaster reserve. So those are going to increase as your operating budget increases. The capital reserve here takes a really big jump. That's based on the average of your capital program for the last couple years. And since we've been funding pretty big capital programs, we see a really big jump there between those 2 years. When we get to FY19, it goes negative, but we think that we're going to be able to cover that essentially from salary savings alone. That's only about 2.5%. And again, we've seen averages of 7 or 8, and 4.5 is the lowest. So we anticipate that that will go away as FY19 progresses. And then FY20, as things come back online, we see a nice healthy reserve policy build up again, almost $600,000. This might be a good time to stop if you guys have any questions on the actual budget before we get into performance objectives.
I thought a few minutes back when you were talking about capital projects, you mentioned an ARF truck, which I didn't remember seeing in here before.
That's in our FAA grant projects. So our FAA application includes an ARF truck.
Okay, but I thought the grant match was just really it was just a few $100,000. Aren't those trucks like $1 million or something?
Yeah. So our grant is 9.34% of the total project or ARF truck or whatever it is, and the federal government pays 90.66%. So that gets us about $2.8 million of total project. That $263,000.
Okay.
And yes, ARF trucks are like $800,000.
All right. Thank you.
So moving on to some key performance objectives. In the administration division, that 495 South Fairview hangar is really important for the airport's revenue streams. So trying to make sure we have full occupancy of the hangars there and completing those electrical repairs in a timely manner. In terms of the FBO RFP, creating leasehold development areas, kind of refining what's on the master plan, and highlighting some financial scenarios and actually issuing an RFP for that. In the business and property group, updating our design guidelines to improve the market appeal of our buildings. Also looking to purchase a new accounts receivable property management system, so migrating into that new system. The 6100 Hollister Avenue development, since it's going to be completed, we want to fill it up with tenants, so putting together a marketing plan to do that. And then the restaurant over at the terminal is rebranding, so working with them to rebrand the restaurant over at the terminal. In the marketing group, completing a redesign of the SBA website. We participated in the Glita Lemon Festival in 2017, so we want to do that again in 2018 and try to do it better. And then also bidding our paid advertising investments so that we can reach as broad a local audience as possible. The facility maintenance, this covers a lot of the capital projects we had talked about, installing those railings on the passenger boarding bridges, painting Hangar 2, replacing the HVAC and the airfield electrical vault, and then also establishing those contracts at 495 South Fairview for things like HVAC maintenance, elevator maintenance. The AOA maintenance group, repainting center lines on the runway and taxiways. And security, reviewing the field training manual and revising it as necessary. In the certain ops group, implementing that commercial ground transportation program. And also doing the design for a replacement of the access control system. That's the FAA grant project that we have planned for the following year. That would be after the ARF truck and the apron. In the facilities planning group, completing the draft update of the specific plan, submitting our local coastal program update to the Coastal Commission, doing some preliminary design work for the taxiway hotel extension. Again, that's a master plan project. Completing construction of the 6100 Hollister development. Doing some work on building 344, that again is the building leased by Maripro right now. And also completing construction of the runway 725 rehabilitation project. The Airport Commission Budget Subcommittee met on March 14th and recommended approval of the operating budget to the full commission. And staff recommendation is that the Airport Commission recommend council approval of the Airport Department's fiscal year 2019 operating budget. With that, I'll take any questions.
Well, we certainly appreciate the real detail that went into this and all of your time and everybody's effort in preparing this. And certainly, as you said, the subcommittee spent a considerable amount of time digging through things and really appreciate all your answers there. Questions?
What is our participation with the Lemon Festival? You said increase our, what do we do?
I'll have Deanna answer.
Okay, thank you.
I knocked over my sign in the process. So we participated last year in the Lemon Festival in a way that we have not done in the past. We actually had a fairly substantial booth there, and we were the official sponsor of the kids area there. So,
cool.
Yeah, so we had some of our educational materials there. We had a drawing for some airline tickets that we had about 1,000 people enter for. So it was actually a really great first experience. But of course we learned a lot the first time we did it. And so our objective for this time around, it's in September. So we've got some time to look at our notes from the last time we did it and look for ways that we can improve it and make it even better.
I'll make sure we go to the Glida Lemon Festival again this year then. And then on a detailed question, the security system, we're talking about the keypads that allow airfield access. Just out of curiosity, is that, is the system not working for us? Is it, is it, why are we replacing it?
I'll have Aaron Keller answer.
So right now the system's in a state where it's operational, but it's reached the end of its useful life. There's software system upgrades we'd like to see take place, as well as some hardware redundancy that we're currently lacking. We've actually, we're in the process of entering a contract with a consultant so they can come in, study the system, kind of advise us exactly where they see the vulnerabilities, and we can do those in the AIP program. It would be federal fiscal year 2020.
Ultimately, when that project is done, then that entire system would be replaced, hardware, software, keypads, all of the...
They'll assess as needed. If we can retain some of the existing infrastructure in place, then we won't need to, do a complete upgrade. It'll just be as necessary. So they're really going to concentrate on the hardware and the software, which is, again, at the end of its useful life.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And this consultant is providing recommendations that you would then go out to bid for a system, most likely?
That's correct, yeah. We're probably looking, I would say, another three months, give or take, until we have the consultant on board. We've just started initial discussions at this point, and then they'll provide recommendations for bid.
No more questions for me.
Excellent presentation.
Question?
I move that the operating budget for the fiscal year 2019 be approved as presented.
Second.
All in favor of approving?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Opposed? No opposed? Okay. With that, the Airport Commission recommends approval of the proposed budget. And brings us to item 12, the Industrial Area Specific Plan Update.
Yes, indeed. I'm not Andrew Vermont, as you know, but he did provide you with an update last July, providing background on the specific plan, and also several of the reasons why we need to update that particular document. As you'll recall, the specific plan was developed in 1997 to assist us with revenue generation and to keep us self-sustaining, which we have to do. But it was also to improve the overall facility on the north side. And with some of the most recent changes that we've had with the sale to direct relief, the upcoming development of 6100 Hollister and also the car dealership being developed outside of the runway protection zone area, we need to update and look at what our other options are for that particular area. We have demoed several buildings and facilities over the years. The theater, as you'll recall, was at Lopez and Hollister. The structural building. We also had a drive-in that we took out years ago. And the big hangar, the biggest hangar on the airport, was located on the north side. And that has also been demolished, along with the dealership that was in the runway protection zone area. New development that's come along or in the works, we have the rental car quick turn facility back on Love Place by the railroad tracks. And then we have direct relief, which is underway, and then our project, and then also the auto park on Hollister coming up. We also need to update our zoning because the City of Santa Barbara updated their overall zoning ordinance, and the only change that we made with ours was pretty much the title of our zoning ordinance. So we need to go through an update based on not just a drive-by where you say, well, here's a carpentry shop, and so that's an allowable use. We need to think proactively about what needs to happen and what could be out there in the future. So we want to do that and, as I said, just clean up the zoning. The new environmental impact report will take a look at what's existing. We need to revise our project description and our vision for the area, catch up on all the various analysis that need to go, and consider new alternatives because we have very little land that's vacant to be developed. We do have some strip of land that could be redeveloped, and whether we redevelop by, as we have been doing with some of our older buildings, by doing new structural embellishments, or we take it down and rebuild it. But all those alternatives need to be looked at in a specific plan, and we need to look at the impacts of doing that and then come up with our proposed mitigation. So we promised you last summer that we were getting a consultant, and we actually are a little behind times, but we did do that. We went out for qualified consultants in October, and we were following the federal guidelines, which is based on qualifications of the consultant, not based on low bid. So when we went out, we had no idea of cost. We didn't set a fee for that. But we did have a very qualified consultant group, RRM Design Group, and so we have, they met the qualifications, and we've been negotiating with them. So we have a proposed contract, and we will be going to council shortly on the first phase. And the first phase will include the market analysis, stakeholder group meetings, and looking at the opportunities and constraints analysis. And we estimate that cost to be $53,000. Then this fall, we'll have a second part of that study come forward where we actually look at each one of the chapters in the specific plan and do an update or complete revision of whatever those chapters might be. That's $115,000. Then comes the hard part, which is the environmental document. As we know, with the master plan that took several years with CEQA, this one I anticipate will take a couple of years to complete as well. And we're anticipating now that that's $185,000. Now you notice in the phase 2, I'm saying $115,000, and Tom just upped that to $150,000. So these numbers are estimates at this point, but they will be based on the scope of work from the consultant. So I just wanted to give you an update to tell you that we will be going to council on April 10th with the first phase of the project, and that we would be awarding it to RRM Design Group. That completes my report.
And that involves in the airport property that hasn't been developed yet, or existing properties that might be redeveloped, whether that's construction or scraping them to the ground or blowing on them as they fall down,
That's correct.
as the case may be. Got it.
Is that for all the airport or only north of Hollister?
No, it's just north of Hollister. And remember, the original specific plan took the area to the AOA fence line. But when we did the master plan, we took the master plan to Hollister. So we have an overlap, and that's one of the areas we need to clean up in the specific plan, is getting those sub areas out and coming up with just focusing on the north side.
Other questions? No. All right, so we got no action on that one. Item 13, rescinding the lease agreement authorization for Athena Contractors. We have a
Right.
presentation?
Ms. Sackerson will do 13 and 14.
Alrighty. Good evening, Commissioners. We do not have a PowerPoint presentation for this, but it is fairly simple and straightforward, although it is a bit unusual, I would say. Both subjects number 13 and 14 are very similar in that we are actually asking you to rescind a prior approval for a lease agreement. These two items are both similar in the sense that they are tenants in the same building, and that's at 94 Frederick Lopez Road across the street. What happened with both of these tenants that they were both subtenants of Teledyne Rayson. It was a company that until November occupied all of one building and most of this building that we're talking about right here. So these folks were subtenants of that company, and when Teledyne left, the idea is that they would then become tenants of the airport, direct lease tenants. And in each case, little different things happen. In the case of Athena Contractors, they wanted to lease that space, and in the time between when we signed the lease proposal and the approval, had a change of heart and decided to locate elsewhere. The good news is that we already have a new tenant for that space, which we would be bringing a lease agreement to you in April for. We actually have a roofing tenant that is an office tenant on airport property, but is a warehouse tenant and yard tenant in another location in Goleta. And so moving to this new location at 94 Frederick Lopez would enable them to consolidate their entire operation on one premises. So it's a great opportunity for them, and it's a great opportunity for us. We know that tenant already, and it's a good tenant. So we're excited about that. So that is the rationale behind Athena Contractors. Again, there will be no lease with Athena, but there will be a lease with a new tenant coming to you in April. So we want to take that one first, or?
Can we do both at the same time?
Let's keep it simple. Do we have a motion to rescind the authorization that was given on December 2017 for Athena Contractors?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We've rescinded the lease agreement with Athena Contractors. Item 14.
Alrighty, so this again, similar item. The water store is actually a neighbor to Athena Contractors, side by side. The water store too was a subtenant of Teledyne, And the complication that happened here is that the water store actually purifies water from just your regular water coming from the system. And they purified it and they sell it. Because they were a subtenant of Teledyne, Teledyne, of course, was paying the water bills. And then, in theory, sending their water bill to the water store. Whether Teledyne knew they were doing this or not, they were subsidizing the water store's water. So over the time period that they were tenants of Teledyne, they had unfortunately built themselves an unrealistic picture of what their true water costs and consumption was. So as soon as they began getting a bill from the city of Santa Barbara for their water, they recognized that this was a cost that they couldn't quite shoulder in the same way. So what they have elected to do is they have elected to find a much less expensive and smaller space in Goleta that will enable them to shoulder the water costs that they didn't realize they were actually incurring. So they will be vacating the space. They're currently in the space under temporary operating permit, and they will be relocating out of that space. So we do need to find a new tenant for that space in the short term.
Well, we hate to see them go, but do we have a motion to rescind the lease agreement from November 2017?
So move.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, rescinded. Thank you. On to the director's report.
Chair, just a few items tonight. Once again, passenger count. And the numbers are different when you look at calendar year versus fiscal year. And Tom's been talking fiscal year. But calendar year to date, month over month, we're up 1.7%. And year to date, we're up 4.4%. So we continue to fill those seats. And that's something that we have worked hard to do. I'd like to point out under the marketing, recent highlight, a couple of things. One, both, you may have seen in the news, both American Airlines and United received awards for some of the best customer service in Santa Barbara for the airport. It was for airports our size. And so Santa Barbara, these companies had awards, and they really do a good job. They really, both those companies, as well as Alaska. And Alaska has a new, am I stealing your thunder? I don't know. But Alaska's going to start, if they haven't already, where you can send wine, a case of wine, up to a case of wine free on their aircraft. So Deanna's been working with them to promote that, and it'll be coming out shortly if it hasn't already. They said from one bottle to a case, and they recommended not putting the bottle in your suitcase. So
Do you have to go with the case of wine?
unfortunately, you
I
do.
see.
You have
can't
to
just
identify it.
put okay, you have to be with it.
But the wine flies free. Also, we've had at the terminal for the last 2 or 3 years a volunteer with his dog, and the dog's name is Loki, and they are they calm people down. And unfortunately, Loki is retiring, so you won't be seeing him in the terminal anymore. But that is the comfort dog. He was really something. One other thing, just another reminder on runway 725, that project's getting ready to start April 8, and that's when our hours will change. We'll close at 10 o'clock at night and open at 6 in the morning, and that will be during the major construction time. We'll switch that, I believe, in June when we start doing the grooving. But that does start, and that's going to be pretty much a week from now, right? So in the city of Goleta, you may hear some beep, beep, beeps of equipment backing up since it's all done at night. But it's an $8 million project, so it is pretty significant, and it is the whole length of our major commercial runway. So, and also I'm excited about the ramp reconstruction at 495 South Fairview. We anticipate that being funded by FAA, or a portion of it being funded by FAA this summer, so that we can get that started towards August, September. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Regarding
Go ahead.
the runway 725 closures after 10, we have flights that come in fairly late and on occasion get delayed past 10 o'clock. And so they will just simply be canceled. Is that
Canceled. We have worked with the airlines, and in some cases, you'll notice United has changed their schedule for that period of time. The others, Alaska and American, I think, did not come in that late. It was just United. So United's changed their schedule, so hopefully that won't happen. But obviously, if we see their lights and they're on their way, we're not going to deny them. But if they don't take off when they're supposed to, then they'll have to just reschedule. Because we have such a short window to tear it down and put it back to usable condition by the before sunup.
But you're
Yeah.
expecting the impact to be minimal with their having shifted their flight.
Minimal. Mm-hmm.
Can you remind us, I think this is a lot more extensive than just putting some pavement on top of what we've got.
Oh, yeah, it's, they're going to dig it out, and in some cases, I can't recall how far down we go. Is 6 inches. So we'll dig out 6 inches and then put in new pavement, compact it, and go forward. And I don't know, do you do the whole width at one time?
So
This is Aaron.
We've been working a little bit on the phasing. The way I understand it, with the addition of the runway safety areas to become compliant with FAA standards, when we shifted the runway further to the west, that portion of the runway, at least the subbase and the lower level of the asphalt pavement, is still in relatively good condition. It's really on the older section of the runway, the eastern 5,000 feet, so to speak, where we get into the significantly degraded pavement that we also found some, I'm not sure of the engineering term they were using, but it was the pavement wasn't aligning properly with the expectation of the subbase over time. So it requires a much deeper mill than we have on the western end of the runway. So as we start, we're going to start on the east end, work our way to the west, and then come back east to the west again. Should be wrapped up hopefully by the end of July if all goes well.
Thank you.
And that is literally, you'll take a section, scrape it down, replace it, compact it, so it's ready to use the following morning.
That's correct. The runway will be operational by 6 o'clock every morning. What they're going to do, just for informational purposes, there's going to be a transitional slope. It's less than a 1% grade. It's accepted by the FAA. So as we go through the day, we'll be doing about 300-foot increments of the runway. They'll install a transitional slope that'll keep it at that 1 degree acceptable tolerance. So there'll be very minimal upslope or downslope for arriving or departing aircraft during the daytime.
When's the last time we did something that significant to 725?
In 2005, right before we did the runway safety area,
I remember that.
and
Okay.
we took 800 and then we put 800. That's why when Aaron was saying the western end is in better condition because it was brand new in 2006.
Right.
The old runway has been here forever, keeping in mind that the length of the runway continues to be 6,052 feet, so it's not bigger, but it's been a while. And FAA requires the airport to come up with pavement indicators. I'm not sure what we do, but we go out and check to see how bad the pavement is. It has to have a certain level before they're really eager to fund it. And as you know, in this particular case, we're getting discretionary money as well because it is the main runway and it's a safety project. So it is a big deal.
Do you recall when we did that now I remember that. Do you recall when we did that last time? Did we have any situations where at 5:30 or 5:45 or 6 o'clock in the morning we just ran out of time and we didn't get the runway back open as planned, or are they?
As far as I can recall, if so, it would be minutes. It's not going to be
Right.
any substantial amount of time. And I think once we're having our operations staff will be out there, maintenance staff will be out as well, and then the contractors are ones that have worked on the airport before. and understand the urgency to get it back into condition.
That was my next question. Is it the same, you recall, is it the same contractor that did the work the last time? Or?
It's Granite Construction, and I know they've done numerous projects on the
I
airport.
think that was them too. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Other questions on the director's report? No? Well,
Thank
thank you
you.
for all that information. And brings us to the end of the agenda. So we're
Good night.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.